Thanks, David. Thanks for the opportunity to be here and speak with all of you today. I think maybe we'll start just with a quick question. Obviously, we have your titles and companies up above, but give us like a 20-second summary of what each of you guys do on a day-to-day basis and why we are talking about local search.
So I'm president partner at Kickpoint. We're a digital marketing agency. We work with very small companies and very large companies, focused on local search, obviously, but also on training them and how to do things themselves in-house.
Great. So my name is Mindy Weinstein, and my company is MarketMindShift. And I think one sentence would actually be, I live and breathe Google. Like, I'm done. No, I do a lot of SEO, so a lot of technical and some local as well, but very much heavy on the technical side.
So my official title is Chief Delegation Officer. I spend my time staring at the screen, trying to understand how small businesses and locations, big and large, interact with reputation, particularly through Google. So I do everything from help develop product to help businesses understand where they fit in the reputation landscape.
That's great.
And when I can, I delegate the tasks
Exactly.
I don't like to do.
Right. So we've got a wide range of perspectives here. We are going to focus primarily on Google in the next 30 minutes. They're definitely the 800-pound gorilla, but we'll get into some other topics later in the discussion as well. So let's start with kind of a fairly broad question, but one which I think has the answer to which has changed considerably in the last couple of years, which is, what is the local SERP these days? What is the local search result? I think we've seen a lot of innovation and evolution, and I'm not sure that a lot of companies are still are aware of just how dramatically it's changed. So how would you categorize the local search, Dana? I guess local search result. Let's start with you.
Whatever Google wants it to be that day. I don't know. A lot of features. Basically, any feature that Google can get their hot little hands on, they're going to toss on there. Like the most recent one we're seeing are menus. So instead of having to go to a restaurant website and download a PDF, they'll just show the menu on the SERP. They'll show events in the SERP. Just anything that they can get is going to go on that SERP and taken from your website, so people don't have to click through anymore. They can just stay on Google forever.
Yep.
And that's really what I was going to say, too, is featured snippets. I mean, the majority of searches now, we know, are on mobile devices. We know voice search is getting more prevalent, which a lot of the voice searches in mobile, they have a local intent involved. And so Google doesn't want you to leave Google. And you know that when you grab your phone and you talk into it, you're going to see the results right there. And so that is a big thing that I've seen as well, is that there's a lot of opportunity there, but you can't ignore featured snippets. They're not going to go away.
So we started seeing what Google refers to as immersive search, where their goal is to take a user down the rabbit hole of local, and that's vertical by vertical, slightly different. From the business's viewpoint, I refer to it as Google as the new homepage. Somebody previously mentioned that the bulk of conversions are occurring right at Google. My research indicates that it's north of 70% in bricks and mortar are taking place at Google, 25% on the website, and the balance being split between Yelp and Facebook. So we see Google, if they can't get the click, they get the clock. They want the user to either click on an ad or to spend time there to call the business, so they'll get the data. And then finally what we're seeing is what Andrew Shotland cleverly called the Gooberization of local, where they are trying to become the local brand of choice. They're now guaranteeing high-risk transactions with the Google brand, so the disintermediating the local brand.
And by Gooberization, we need to say that those are O's with the umlaut, as in Uberization of local, right? So essentially becoming the default destination for local service transactions and
who knows what else.
And who knows what else, exactly. So, and I think, one of our colleagues, Cindy Crum, a few years ago, I think, sort of summarized what's happening with Google quite well, calling it that they want to become the presentation layer of the internet, which I think is really, really apt. And so in this presentation layer, Mindy, I think I'll go to you with this question. So given that so much is happening now directly on the Google search result, and as Mike said, they're trying to create this immersive experience, what is the place of websites then in this new framework that Google is delivering searchers?
So to me, the website is still important, but it's really how are you setting up your pages. Given that we are thinking about voice search, we're thinking about mobile queries, we have to set up our pages a certain way. And so with featured snippets, the majority of what you see, which isn't going to be shocking because you do searches, are questions. The majority are questions, but we also see prepositions. We do see some keywords, but usually it's those questions. So for you, what that tells you is that you have to really focus on how can I answer a question that I know my local audience is going to ask. How can I answer that sufficiently? And usually if it's a question, you're going to be looking at a paragraph that you're going to create. And you don't want a long paragraph. It has to be a snippet because it is called featured snippets. But if you're looking at a preposition, you might look at lists. But you have to focus on your pages. And that's really what's changed. It's what is the architecture of that page. Instead of being upset about Google taking your clicks away from you, well, let's just make sure that we're the one that's there. And so that's really what I'm seeing.
And Dana, I know you've got a lot of experience in this area, some more personal than others.
Yeah, I feel
what
like,
would you say?
Yeah, we lost our knowledge panel. Let's see, can't get it back. I think one of the things for sure is that your website is becoming a vehicle for whatever Google wants it to be. So instead of focusing on your website, almost doesn't matter in terms of what the website looks like. It's more a vehicle for Google to take things from it to present on their presentation layer. I think that's the big thing to focus on is how can you make Google like your website more. And searches for sure snippets. If Google can show a local focus snippet, they will. So if you do a search for a question phrase in your local area with all your localization, everything else turned on, and let's say, for example, you're here and you search for something like cognitive behavior therapy, which is a popular term for anxiety therapy searches. And you get, in some places, you get a search result from the National Health Service in the UK. Well, that means that's a local snippet opportunity for you. So are those opportunities existing, and how can you essentially steal them away from the places that have them now that probably shouldn't? It's not a relevant result for someone here to go to the UK Health Service, so what can you do better?
And Mike, what would you say to that question in terms of?
The website in my research is still the second most important point of conversion, so it still requires traditional great content, good visuals, compelling story. Secondly, it's, as always with Google, they rank everything, and the website is a key ranking factor still in local. But as you've pointed out, and we've discussed many times, it is becoming also a key data source for conversions on this page. So it's now taking on a third role without having lost the two previous roles.
Right. So
And then a fourth role in terms of feeding this rich snippet or the direct answer.
Right. So the trend definitely seems to be then Google taking information from not just our website but other websites as well and compiling some sort of structured schema, right? That they're then presenting information at Google. So are there tactics out here for the agencies and product companies that are selling to small businesses? Are there specific tactics that they can take back to their service offerings to help structured data appear more in these new search results? Mindy, why don't you kind of take that one?
I can start with that. So one of the big things is that if you're going after a featured snippet, you actually have to be ranking for whatever that phrase is. And you want to generally be within the first 10 positions for you to have a shot at it. So that's the first thing. And so that still falls back into what we're talking about, the website. You know, your website does have to do well. So that's the first thing. And then looking for that exact phrase match. So whatever question that is, whatever preposition that is, that has to be exactly on your website. And as I started to allude to, even the way you structure your content is going to be different based on what type of featured snippet you're going after. So if it's a question, answer it with a paragraph, a very short paragraph. I mean, we're talking just a couple sentences. And if it's preposition, it's generally a list. And one thing I would add too is that you've probably been seeing is that there's now even video snippets, you know, and I found one myself the other day, and I won't even tell you what it was because I have two boys and my husband, and they're all laughing at me because I looked this up, and why would you ever look that up? And but there was a video, and I watched it, you know, and so we're seeing that too. So I would say, in addition to what we're talking about, look for video opportunities in the snippets.
Sorry, go ahead, Dana.
No.
I was just going to ask, so from the small business standpoint, obviously it makes a ton of sense. Are there opportunities for sort of larger publishers who publish in the local space to also get these featured snippets, or are there, you know, the organic results on which they've relied for traffic for the last decade, are they just SOL on those on that traffic?
I think if they structure the content so that they get the snippets, that's the trick. And there's a lot of focusing on those old school non-question, like non-semantic search phrases, and that needs to just be put aside because you're ranking for that, and that's great. But that's not how people are searching now. And particularly depending too on the audience that you're going for. You know, age makes a difference, particularly when it comes to voice search. You know, the younger audience you're going for, the more voice searches you're going to have. Obviously, there's like a slice of the very technologically adept, regardless of age, who are comfortable talking to their phones. But typically, it is like the 45 and younger audience who are doing voice search. So who are you going after? What venue are they using? And how are you going to restructure your content to meet that?
And Mike, anything to add before we kind of move on to other things Google's working on? Yeah.
Can I do a shameless self-promotion?
Sure, why not?
So I see content and rich snippets as a critical component of a small business website. And one of the focuses that we've had in first-party feedback and reviews is to publish that content in real time to the website in rich snippets on a location-by-location or a product-by-product basis. And in doing so, engender the stars in search, and we're seeing from various case studies anywhere between a 35% and a 400% click-through increase from Google based on that rich snippet content.
So you can still get visitors from a Google search. They're not devouring all of them.
They're not devouring all of them, particularly in mobile. You know, that 25% that I said was coming from the website, the bulk of that's coming from Google Organic.
Right. So there's still an opportunity and still a strong role for websites and website content. We all kind of agree, I think. But as we know, Google is actively seeking content far beyond just websites, right? They've come out with several major products in the last year that are seeking to present more and more content in knowledge panels or in associated sort of local results. And Mike, you've been one of the early leading analysts of both of these features, Google Posts and Google Q&A. Where do you see these things going over the next, let's say, 2 or 3 years?
So I'm curious, how many people recognize that Google is now creating conversations around specific locations using a Q&A product? If you're aware of it, raise your hand.
Andrew Shotland strongly
okay,
raised his hand at the back, but there's still a few that haven't. So
right. So what Google did in August was released a FAQ type product directly on the location, and it was stealth mode for 3 months. It went out to the desktop in December. I looked at personally 2,000 locations. 25% of them had questions. 90% of big brand locations had questions. Of those questions, somewhere in the order of 15% were violations of terms of service with anytime you get into user-generated content, very strange. So incredibly fascinating for me. So Google is working very hard at aggregating massive amounts of information, either directly from the business in the form of posts or from consumers in the form of this Q&A. And clearly Google is moving more towards this direction of Google as the homepage. And they also introduced websites, which was minimum viable product when it came out, but they've already enhanced it once. So if you're looking at TikTok every 6 months upgrade, it's now become integrated with posts and is very viable for very small businesses.
Well, I'm going to say Q&A is actually a great source of content, too, if you actually get usable questions, which not everybody does. Sometimes it's just trash. Yes. But every once in a while, there's a good question there.
The question I liked the most was, this was a Walmart in Nebraska, which aisle won't I smell the farts?
So a little bit of a reputation management potential
it's a disaster
nightmare here.
right now. And most brands have no idea. They're not paying attention because they maybe don't get the notifications. And I mean, I'm going to plug Mike's product. Get 5 stars is the first thing I've seen that actually pays attention to Q&A and lets you answer it. Otherwise, you just have to manually remember to go in and check it, and it was time for that.
Yeah, for sure. And you know, Mindy, to your earlier point, right, and sort of tying in what you said, Dana, you know, answering those same questions on your website, right, can actually lead to even greater visibility. So don't think of this as just, you know, the sky is falling. Maybe use it to your advantage.
Absolutely. And that's actually something, just on a side note, that like I've always preached and always followed, is that, you know, as much as we like to look at numbers and we like to look at data, there is a human being on the other end that we're trying to access. And so we really want to know what they're going to say. And I say that, and I'm joking because really, especially in like very, SEO on page. It's like, use this keyword, use that keyword, but is that really how people are talking? So I actually love the fact that, to me, this is an insight that we can see what people are saying. We can see what they're asking us. So there's opportunity. It frightens me in the fact that there's probably going to be a lot of companies that ignore it until all of a sudden they're like, oh, wow, look at all these questions, that, and all these answers we didn't give. And so monitoring it is going to be huge.
Yeah, it's going to be a huge reputation.
So all of you
management
who
problem.
did not raise your hands that had heard of Q&A, you should bombard these guys at lunch with questions,
guess
because it's
what
a
you're doing
really
tonight.
important
And
new feature.
while you're sitting there bored listening to us, do a search on Target Boulevard, Denver, and dig into the Q&A and read it. You'll be amazed.
Pretty scary, yeah. So we've talked a lot about what Google's doing organically, but they've also released, at least 3 new ad products in local in the last 18 months. How do you see the sort of monetization side going? And Dana, let's start with you and kind of move down the row.
I love what Google's doing for AdWords and local, honestly. I think it's fantastic. I think one of the best things that we see are near me searches. They are spectacular. If you aren't doing AdWords just for like vet near me, for example, like that for some of our clients, those are the highest converting keywords. And by highest converting, I mean like 30% of people who search for that end up calling the client. It's a bargain, well, until all of you start doing it, but do it before your competitors do. It's a bargain, and it converts, and it's not even clicking necessarily to get to the website. They're just calling the phone number on the ad. Like it's immediate, this interest.
And Martin talked about that in his presentation a few minutes ago. It's just so many conversions now are happening right on the knowledge panel, right? I mean,
Well, yeah, because that's all they need to know, right? Are you open right now? Do you do this? I looked at the Q&A, and yes, you do, deal with guinea pigs if you're a vet,
Right.
So great. I'm just going to go ahead and give you a call. I'm not going to bother loading up the website because I only have so much data, and I have no idea if it's going to suck, so I might as well just give you a call.
And Mike, I know you and I have talked in our Street Fight column quite a bit about a couple of other new ad formats that Google's come out with, including home service ad, or now local service ads.
Right.
Explain a little bit where you think that's going, what they're up to and where that's going.
So local service ads first rolled out as an effort for Google to control high spam industries. They've gotten into the business of vetting plumbers, garage door openers, and locksmiths, vetting them down to the employee level to be in the program. So they've gone into the cities they're in. I think they're in now, is it
Half
30?
a dozen at least.
Half a dozen with a list of 30 coming, where they are vetting those businesses to be eligible to be in the program if they don't pass this Pinkerton test, which is quite rigorous. And then they're guaranteeing any transaction with these businesses with a $2,000 guarantee. So I see this as a huge play in local, both against the likes of House, and also as an answer to, we saw them showing up in voice in Google Home. Show me a plumber. These are the results that show, because Google knows they've been vetted. I see it as a resolution to the danger of Google sending a dangerous person into your home, like a locksmith who's going to rip you off. And I see it as a basis of an economic model that can dramatically shift the economics of local.
Right, and this plays right into Andrew's comment about the gooberization, right? This is the gooberization where you just say, I need a plumber, and one shows up at your house that Google has vetted.
Now, interestingly, the price on these is quite low. It's about $19 to $25 per quote. But when I saw a case study that compared that to a PPC campaign, and Google requests 3 quotes, so that's $60, and the PPC campaign was $56. So Google was still increasing their income. The businesses were very happy with the ROI, and the consumers theoretically felt comfortable because it was guaranteed.
The Google vetted rep,
Well, yeah,
exactly.
people trust Google, right? It's one of the most trusted brands in the world.
Right.
So if Google said this plumber's cool, then I can have him in. No problem.
Right. And I think we've got the Google Reserve guy speaking later this afternoon, so I won't kind of get into that, but that's yet another area where they aren't currently monetizing, but may monetize in the future. All right, so let's move on. We as I said, Google is the 800-pound gorilla, but there are other players in the local space. Let's talk a little bit about what Facebook's doing. Obviously, they released their local app not too long ago. Tell us, Dana, we'll start with you and kind of move down the list. Where do you see Facebook headed? What's the best use case for a typical small business on Facebook?
Facebook, I mean, they freaked out everybody when they said we're going to stop showing business page stuff, and everybody freaked out, right? It's like, calm down. You already had to do pay to play on Facebook already anyway, so nothing of this is new. I think a lot of where Facebook is useful, they're seeing that it is people doing local searches, but the local search within Facebook obviously was terrible, so this is what this local app is for. Are they going to integrate it with the main Facebook app? Well, they probably should. I mean, Facebook seems to be splitting into all these different little, like an app for this and an app for that, and people just aren't going to download 4 different apps, they just want to use one. So I think it will get merged into the main product. I think it won't, though, until it serves more countries than just, the US, which it is right now. Right. And I think that's one of the biggest things about it is that I don't think it's going to have a lot of uptake until it goes into the main app, but paying attention to it now will show you where Facebook is going to go. And I think they are going to start improving their ads product. There's a big push. I don't know if you've been getting a lot of calls from your Facebook ad reps, but we have. And there's a big push right now on focusing on local businesses and teaching people how to do better advertising on Facebook, because I think they're going to start offering more advertising opportunities. Mm-hmm.
Very good. And then apart from the paid side, I think Mindy on our pre-call, you seem to see Facebook primarily as or maybe should be thought of primarily as a customer service vehicle, right? You want to talk a little bit more about that perspective?
Right, because I look at it from the lens of organic, and so like for Facebook, I look at that as still an opportunity that you're going to optimize, even locally, especially for a local business, optimize your profile just like you would a page that on your website, because that is indexed by the search engines. You have to be there, and to me, Facebook is very much a branding play. But I use it for SEO purposes, like I said. I mean, if I find that a small business isn't on there, I'm like, okay, you don't have to be active on there, but let's at least make sure that you have a business profile, because we want to own the search result. And better believe that Google is going to be indexing your Facebook business profile page.
And what's the first thing you see when you open up the Facebook page is how fast they respond to messages, right? It's one of the most prominent things on there. So that also lends to the voice search, the younger demographic, right? Like those pesky millennials, they don't want to call on the phone, they want to text people. Right. And messaging is part of that. It's why Google has Messenger now, and it's why Facebook Messenger is becoming a huge part of business communications through that platform. Yep.
And Mike, you've kind of talked a little bit about messaging in our conversations on Street Fight. You think it's time to start paying attention to that both as a local business and as a service provider?
I think it's a critical play for service providers to help small businesses cope with the pending onslaught of messaging. Google introduced a chat on their Knowledge Panel. Facebook's been pushing it. Apple's going to be getting into it this year. WhatsApp just released. And there is no way the small business person can manage that, let alone cope with it. And so they end up focusing on one, missing all the others. There are a number of ways to integrate this into a single back end. Back to the Facebook question, Facebook's been very good at capturing local conversations, particularly in communities, but that's a very difficult thing for a small business or an agency to monetize, because it's a conversation between people, and so that's always been there. And
you don't want to be the guy at the cocktail party that just goes out handing around business cards and then moves on, right?
Yeah, particularly me, because I can never find mine, to my partner's dismay.
No, but that tells you what you should be advertising on, right? If people are having that conversation, go check out their page. People don't make them private. What do they like? There you go. There's your advertising audience.
Yeah. And you still see Facebook ads as the sort of gold standard of local advertising potential.
They do very well. I mean, if you're just clicking the boost button and tossing money at it, of course not. But if you're actually putting the effort in, absolutely. Especially radius advertising. That's really great. I mean, just put radius ads in your competitors. There you go. It's, especially like car dealerships, this is really good for that. If you can put radius ads in your competitors, what do people do while they're waiting for their car to be serviced? They're on Facebook. So why wouldn't you advertise on there?
Yep. Very good. And are there other social channels that you think businesses should be paying attention to, or is Facebook really the dominant player?
Well, Instagram, the other Facebook.
Instagram, yeah. And Mindy, what's your take on that?
I always feel like I have to take a deep breath before I say it, because everyone cringes. Twitter, and I'll tell you why. So, because businesses, when I say Twitter, they're like, oh, great, here we go again. Not saying that you have to be tweeting constantly, but again, tweets are indexed. And I'm still looking at it from an organic perspective, that if I know that tweets are indexed, don't I want to just own that space again on the search results page? So at the very least, have a presence there. It doesn't mean that you have to constantly be tweeting unless that's where your audience is, but at least have somewhat of a presence.
Well, and again, going back to content, people have conversations on Twitter that then turn into content. So at least you should be listening, even if you aren't tweeting.
Right. And for service providers out there, these conversations happening are an easy sort of way for them to generate content for their customers, right?
Yeah, and I mean, you can jump into the conversation if it makes sense. We set up a Zapier automation for a pizza place that if anyone within 25 kilometers of their location mentioned pizza in a tweet, that it would push their Slack channel, and then if it made sense for them to hop on, then they could. It happened right before the Icelandic Prime Minister said that pineapple on pizza should be banned, which I agree with. And so there were lots and lots of pineapple tweets, and so they could just respond to all of them and be like, hey, we can give you a pizza without pineapple, with pineapple. Here's a coupon. And it worked out well for them, and they're still listening.
Right. And Mike, to your point, though, it's, that can be overwhelming for the individual pizza parlor owners. So it's actually a great spot for service providers to get into.
Yeah, I think actually helping businesses just listen is as much important as anything, which is just paying attention to what's being said and responding when appropriate.
Yeah, and I mean, that's why we use a lot of Slack integrations, because if they have Slack set up, and a lot of small businesses do, then just set up a channel and then push it in there so they can pay attention to it. And if you have multiple locations, let the locations talk to each other, because the problem that one location has or questions people asking there are relevant to all the locations.
Right. And that's true with Q&A in terms of informing both the FAQ on the website, but also informing the other locations. And it's scary for me to think that your knowledge panel may become a focus of a conversation around your brand for that location. That's a scary thought if you've got 100 locations.
I can't wait for the first BuzzFeed article. I mean, now that you mentioned that Target, that's a perfect candidate for a BuzzFeed article about a ridiculous Q&A garbage fire on Google.
Yep. Well, we have 3 minutes left, which hardly seems enough time to talk about the two other giants, Amazon and Apple. But let's talk about them in the context of voice search primarily. I know, Mike, you and I have disagreed about this, but I think Amazon's device lead in the home device category is significant and important. Where do you see Amazon's position in, let's say, 3 years?
So I saw it as a necessary play for Amazon because they lost out in the phone war. So it's for them, a critical platform. I see it speaks to what they do, which is sell stuff. But meanwhile, Apple has 500 million active Siri users last month, which gives them both leverage into that home market as well as deep control over it with an anti-marketing sentiment, making it very difficult for anybody here to actively engage with it beyond optimizing your feed through the company, Telly's company that's doing the feed the Apple there, Nav ads.
Yeah, that's Lex. He was on stage earlier.
I mean, there's little to be done there that's overtly focused that you can contribute to because Apple has such a strong intention of keeping that dark.
Right. But certainly making sure that you have the critical sort of core knowledge correct and fed to Apple is essential. And Mindy, I'll just kind of leave the last sort of general question to you before we get into your final recommendations. So, you follow voice search pretty closely. You mentioned featured snippets are a great way to get in there. Have you seen any, to Mike's point, Apple is pretty dark. Have you been able to track any kind of Siri visits or conversions through voice?
So this is an easy answer. No, I have not. No,
Which
I have not.
I don't know that anybody has really done it right. It's very difficult to track. So
it's happening.
It is happening. We just don't know the volume. So I was just curious. All right. So we do have a minute left, and I know lunch is coming up pretty soon. So we'll stay on task. So can you guys each in 30 seconds, kind of, what's your biggest takeaway if you were to share with the service providers out here? What are the things that they need to know about for their business? What are the biggest things they should be paying attention to help their small business customers? Dana, we'll start with you and get on the list.
I actually liked what a speaker said this morning about how, stop thinking about AI if you don't have the fundamentals down. And I think that's something that can get lost in all this excitement about the brand new features that are out there. And Mindy will speak to this too. I mean, you have to make sure that your website, people may not visit it, but it's the foundation for everything that's going to happen on Google. And without that being solid, it's just not going to happen. And so many people who we talk to are like, I'm not ranking on local, and you look why, and it's very obvious why. So get those fundamentals down. And also paid. SEO, people who do local SEO and are focusing on just SEO are missing out on a massive opportunity. You have to do both.
For me, I mean, there's really two things I'm looking at. One, I would say, because it's something I always do, you have to pay attention to the search results page and the layout, because it's constantly changing. So don't sit back and wonder why you're not getting the traffic or your clients aren't getting the traffic. Know what's going on. Like I just even mentioned video snippets. Know what's happening. Know the changes that Google's making. And then on top of that is the website, like you said. We can't control a lot. We get frustrated with Google, or I get frustrated with Google, but we can control our own website, so let's be smart with it. Let's use it to our advantage. Let's use it so we can show up better in local search, so we can show up better in featured snippets, so we have a chance for all other sorts of opportunities that are out there.
So for me, there's two big themes I've been working on for the last year and thinking about. One is Google as your new homepage and optimizing to that view. Google's going to give you your fair share of searches, but you're not going to be able to dominate a local market anymore because of the way it's so localized. And reputation is always current for small business, and it plays a huge role in that page. So put reputation at the forefront for businesses in its broadest sense, not can I get more reviews, but am I a better business?
Right, and what are people saying, and how can I help influence those opinions? Great. Okay. Well, we're a minute over. Sorry about that, David. But please join me in thanking these really smart people and capture them at lunch.